Hey friends, David Miller, Phoenix, Arizona multimedia artist. Welcome you to another video on photography. This time I am talking about a camera that I got late last year, the Fuji X-T4. And I'm gonna do a sequence of videos going through the features of the X-T4. It has a lot of cool new things that I've slowly been discovering. It's a step up from my X-T2. I never got an X-T3. Figure I always skip a generation when I buy a new camera, especially considering how expensive they are and sometimes how incremental the shifts are between camera models. But in the case of the X-T4, there's a lot of cool new features that I'm finding as I do shoots in my home studio with what little travel I'm able to do at the end of 2020, early 2021. And today I'm going to talk about double exposure features. I should say multiple exposure features, because on the X-T2, I had a switch that allowed me to do double exposures, overlapping frames. And this was very rudimentary. I was able to do 2 exposures on one frame, and then I got a single JPEG gestalt of both of those images. On this camera, it's a multiple exposure setting within the shoot menu, and you have 4 compositing choices, and you're able to shoot multiple exposures. I haven't tested the limit of how many exposures I can put onto one frame, but I did do one that had 5 exposures on my test. It looked pretty chaotic, have to be honest, but just being able to have that extra step of creativity allows me to pursue the kind of surrealism that I like. In many of my instant film portraits with the Fuji Neo Classic that had a double exposure button, the Polaroid Now that I work with, and certainly the other Polaroid cameras that are like above the basic model, most of those have double exposure features in them. The Lomo cameras that I work with allowed for infinite exposures. So instead of just having 2 images that overlap, you could constantly press the button and get like a sequence of time or a blend of texture and person. Just get stuff that feels kind of trippy and isn't limited to this one single image or this one single moment of reality. And so, I mean, that's my short spiel of why I even like double exposures. They allow for a sort of expressiveness and chaos that, yes, you can get it in the computer. You certainly can do layering and double exposures, multiple exposures within Photoshop and apps on your phone. But when you're doing it while you're shooting, it feels a little more authentic to the moment to me. So here we have our camera. I have the LCD screen flipped backwards so you can get this nice reflection of my Catfish of the Bottleman t-shirt. I'll go ahead and turn on the camera. No card in it, don't need it to show you how to do this stuff. First I'm gonna set my dial in the upper left to single, so I get single shots. And then I gotta make sure that my dial over here is not on movie, it's on still. Go into the menu, scroll down to the camera settings, and we will find multiple exposure towards the end of this, right before wireless communication. If you are using Wi-Fi, I wasn't able to get the multiple exposure to work with that, so you're gonna have to control your camera the way you normally would with your fingers, not through your smartphone. Go ahead into multiple exposures, turn it on. And we have 4 different choices: additive, average, bright, and dark. I'll go ahead and show you examples of each one that I shot in my home studio, just using white backdrop and a couple flashlights for my lighting. Sometimes I had the flashlights with a gel on, that's why you see these funky colors in some of these images. My favorites were bright and dark. Bright was really useful for cutting out the areas that didn't overlap. I didn't get the ghost image, little extra stuff that I got when I shot with additive and average. And dark was particularly useful when I wanted to do a multiple exposure that the part that would have been ghostly in additive or average came out pretty solid. So we have some images of Brielle here with multiple arms. Those were done using dark. Now, balancing the images in the shoot, trying to get things to overlap perfectly. I did have my camera on a tripod for a few of these, but I found that it didn't make a difference if the camera was on a tripod if I was shooting at a human being, because the human being moved around a little bit. So it was a little easier when I did these images of Riley to have my camera off of the tripod in my hands and have somebody else manipulate the light to get it the way that I wanted it to be. When I was shooting with Brielle, I was alone, so I had to manipulate the light as well as the camera, and this made it a little shakier in my hands. If you're looking for perfection and you want to use a similar technique like this, I recommend that you have another human being on hand to manipulate the lights, and that you have your camera off a tripod so you can align things like people's facial features yourself. They're going to move around even if they're sitting in a chair. Nobody can hold still long enough for you to take 2 double exposures and have them overlap perfectly. So we're going to explore the 4 blending modes that I did while shooting a few models at my home studio. This white backdrop is the one that I used when I did my multiple exposures. I find that having a clean background really helps in controlling the chaos, if that makes sense. Like, I want something that's unique, surreal, trippy, but I don't want it to be overly messy. Now, while shooting these, I certainly did get results that seemed overly messy, but some of the added benefits of shooting multiple exposures in the X-T4, one, you can always retry your image, you can back up, you can decide that this is good enough. Those are all things in the menu that you see when you're doing the multiple exposures. And you also get original RAW files of each one of your exposures. So if I photograph a model doing this, and then she changes to this for the second exposure, I'll get my JPEG that blends those two together, but I'll get the original RAW files as well. So I certainly can finesse those in Lightroom and Photoshop if I liked the result. If the blend was just a little bit off, because I tend to hold my camera in my hand instead of putting it on a tripod when I do these things, I certainly have the original RAW files that I can shift around in Photoshop and get the 100% desired result, if that's the way you want to go. So there you have it, my explorations in the home studio using the multiple exposure function in the X-T4. There will be more videos on the X-T4. I really want to explore what this camera can do creatively this year, and I'm gonna try and make videos of each one of these explorations and share them with you on this channel. Once again, thanks for watching. Talk to you next time.